All right, listeners, ready for another deep dive? Today we're going to get into some Greek mythology.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Apollo and Artemis, the twin archers.
Oh, those two?
You know what's so interesting about them?
Mm.
When you start looking into it, they really are way more than just like a sibling rivalry thing.
Right.
Yeah, we've got a ton of sources here.
Yeah.
And it's like they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
They're both incredible archers,
Yeah.
obviously.
Right.
They've got this really, really messed up family dynamic.
Yeah.
And they've both got this incredible divine power.
Mm-hmm.
But then you start to look deeper and deeper.
Yeah. And their differences are so striking.
Yeah. And, you know, what I kept thinking about was you've got Artemis with the moon, with the wildness, and then you've got Apollo with the sun and civilization.
Yeah. It's like this constant interplay between those two forces.
It really makes you wonder, are they working together to make some kind of balance or?
Yeah. Are they constantly at odds? Yeah. That's exactly what we're going to try to figure out today.
Right.
And I think a good place to start is with their birth story.
Okay.
So imagine this. You've got Leto, their mom, on the run from Hera.
Zeus's wife.
Exactly. Who, understandably, is not thrilled about these twins.
Of course not.
No. So Hera put this curse on Leto that she can't give birth on solid land.
Okay, so where does she have these kids? Like a deserted island?
Close? A floating island?
Whoa, seriously. Talk about starting life in a precarious position.
I know, right? And it really sets the stage for, like, their fierce protectiveness over Leto. It's like they come out ready to defend her against anything.
They had to.
Yeah, like when that giant Tydeus tried to assault her, Apollo and Artemis took him down without hesitation.
It's like, don't mess with our mom.
Exactly. And then there's Niobe, who boasted that her human children were better than these two divine twins.
Oh, she learned that lesson the hard way.
She did.
Yeah.
So these stories really show us that challenging divine authority.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to mom.
Especially when it comes to Leto had some serious consequences.
Yeah.
But let's talk about their archery skills. Because they were both incredibly talented, but it's like their archery styles were reflections of their personalities.
I totally agree with that, yeah.
And like how at 3 years old, Artemis just marches up to Hephaestus, the god of the forge, and demands a bow and arrow.
Wow.
Yeah, she like grabs him by the beard.
She's feisty.
Yeah. And then she just goes off and finds Pan, the god of the wild, to get hunting dogs, and then captures these magnificent golden horned deer to pull her chariot.
She is making her own world out there.
I know. It's incredible.
It's amazing.
And then, you know, some sources talk about how she was offered 30 cities, but chose to just roam the mountains instead.
Wow. That's commitment.
I know, right? Like, if someone offered me 30 cities, I'd at least want to check out the penthouse in one of them.
I'd at least go on vacation.
Right.
Yeah.
But for Artemis, it shows how connected to nature she is.
Yeah.
Like rejecting those traditional structures.
Yeah. Yeah, bucking the system.
Yeah. And then you have Apollo, who receives his bow and arrow to defeat the Python.
Right. To protect his mom.
Exactly. So it's this initial motivation of revenge and justice.
Yeah.
Which is very different from Artemis just going after it herself.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah. And, you know, even though he becomes known for music, prophecy, healing, you know, that early association with defeating the Python.
It's a good origin story.
It is. It's a great origin story.
Yeah.
Like, he's a defender, a divine warrior.
All right, so their tools are similar.
Yeah.
But their purpose and style are so different.
Totally.
Like their archery reflects their contrasting domains.
Yeah.
Artemis with the wilderness, Apollo with order and civilization. And it goes even deeper when you think about their approach to love and relationships.
Oh, yeah. That's where things get really interesting.
So we've got Artemis, this fierce huntress who vows eternal virginity.
Right. And is ready to defend that vow at any cost.
Oh, yeah. Remember Actaeon?
Poor Actaeon.
The guy who stumbles upon Artemis bathing and gets turned into a stag and ripped apart by his own dogs.
Talk about sending a message.
Don't mess with Artemis.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when it comes to her independence.
Exactly.
Okay, but then we've got Apollo, who's like the opposite.
Yeah, quite the opposite.
Yeah, he's got this whole reputation as a lover.
With tons of affairs, both mortal and divine.
Really running the gamut.
Yeah, he gets around.
Okay, so it's like they represent opposite ends of a spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, Artemis embodies self-sufficiency and independence.
Yeah.
And then Apollo seems driven by a need for connection.
Yeah.
Which,
doesn't always work out so well for him.
Not always. Yeah, like his unrequited love for Daphne.
Oh, yeah. Daphne.
Turns into a laurel tree to escape him.
Right. Pretty clear rejection.
Yeah.
But it ends up fueling his creativity.
Yeah.
You know, the laurels becomes the symbol of poetry and victory.
So even in rejection, there's a spark of creation for Apollo.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder if these are really opposite approaches or just two sides of the same coin.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, and speaking of unexpected connections,
Oh, yeah.
there's one exception to Artemis's no romance policy.
Really?
Orion, the giant hunter.
Wow, that's a curveball.
Yeah, he's like the wild card in this whole thing.
So we've got the fiercely independent huntress
Mm-hmm.
and the god associated with music and poetry.
Yeah.
And somehow they both end up tangled up with this giant hunter.
It's a wild story. Buckle up.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Okay, so
So Orion, he's a fascinating character. He's this really skilled hunter, kind of like Artemis,
Right.
roams the wild, and there are all these different versions of their story.
Okay, well, let's get into that. I'm curious. What are some of those versions and how do they relate to the twins' whole dynamic?
Well, one version talks about Orion boasting to Gaia.
The Earth Goddess.
Yeah, that he could kill every single beast on Earth.
Oh, that's not a good idea.
No, Gaia's not someone you want to mess with.
Right, so she's got to teach him a lesson.
Well, she does. She sends a giant scorpion after him.
Oh, wow, that's scary.
Yeah.
So what happens? Does Orion make it out of that?
He doesn't, sadly.
Oh, no.
They have this big battle, and Orion falls.
Okay.
Artemis, heartbroken, puts his image up in the stars as the constellation Orion.
Oh, wow.
So it's a real testament to their connection.
Yeah, it's like she's immortalizing him, making sure his spirit lives on.
Right.
But I remember there's another version too, right? Where Apollo gets involved.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's where things get a little messy.
Okay.
So in this version, Apollo is either worried about Artemis breaking her vow.
Right, of chastity.
Yeah. You know, she's fiercely devoted to her independence.
Yeah.
Or he's jealous.
Interesting.
So either way, he tricks Artemis into killing Orion.
Wait, how does that even happen? Artemis is a great archer.
That's just it. That's the brilliance of Apollo's plan.
Okay.
He challenges her to this test of skill,
Okay.
daring her to hit this far-off target bobbing in the waves. But the target is actually Orion's head.
Whoa. That is dark.
Yeah.
So he manipulates his own sister to kill this guy she maybe loved.
It's definitely complicated.
Yeah.
Some people say Apollo is being protective, you know?
Okay.
He didn't want Orion to jeopardize her position as a goddess.
Makes sense.
But others say it was pure jealousy.
Yeah.
You know, like a darker side to this usually bright god.
Okay, so even the gods aren't above these messy emotions.
No, they're not.
And for Artemis, the tragedy is twofold.
Yeah, she loses Orion, and she's the one who killed him.
That's awful.
It is. It's a powerful story. You know, it makes you think about fate, manipulation,
Yeah.
and what happens when emotions get out of control.
Yeah, and it just underscores how complicated their relationship is.
It does.
Okay, so we've seen how their personalities, their domains play out.
Mm-hmm.
But how do these opposite forces work together? Especially when you look at something like the Trojan War.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah.
The Trojan War, huge event in Greek mythology. And both Apollo and Artemis have big parts to play,
Okay, well, let's get into that.
but in very different ways.
Okay.
So we've got Apollo participating as a soldier.
Okay, makes sense. Good archer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he also uses his power to unleash plagues.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Apollo, the god of music and healing, is spreading disease.
He is.
That doesn't sound like him.
Well, that's the duality, isn't it?
Right.
He can create and destroy.
Yeah.
And in the Trojan War, he chooses destruction.
I guess it makes sense. He's loyal to the Trojans, the Greeks are the enemy.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about Artemis? She doesn't seem like the war goddess type.
Well, her involvement's more subtle, but still impactful.
Okay, how so?
Remember how Agamemnon, the Greek leader,
Yeah.
offended her?
I think so. What did he do?
He claimed he was a better hunter than her.
Oh, yeah, that's not a good move.
No, Artemis doesn't let insults slide, especially from a mortal.
Of course not.
To appease her anger, she demands Agamemnon sacrifice his daughter, Iphigenia.
Oh, wow, that's intense.
Yeah, it shows just how powerful she is.
Yeah, and how serious she is about defending her honor.
Right, but some accounts say she shows mercy and saves Iphigenia in the end.
Oh, okay, so even in her wrath, she's still got compassion.
Yeah.
But what I find really interesting is that they're both fighting on the same side.
Yeah, for the Trojans.
Yeah, so it suggests some sort of unity
Absolutely, a shared loyalty.
that goes beyond their differences.
Yeah, that connection, that heritage, it binds them together.
Okay, so we've got these two powerful gods, great archers, protective of their mother, fighting together.
Mm-hmm.
But where they really diverge is their approach to love and relationships.
Absolutely. That's key to their duality.
So on the one hand, Artemis, the eternal virgin,
right, fiercely independent,
surrounded by her group of women who also vow chastity.
It's like she created her own society.
Yeah.
Free from all those expectations of the patriarchal world.
It's pretty empowering.
It is.
She's not defined by romantic relationships or societal pressures.
Exactly.
She's forged her own path on her own terms.
Yeah.
But then you have Apollo craving connection.
Seeking it out through all these affairs.
With mortals and goddesses.
It's like this emotional exploration for him.
Okay.
Pursuing beauty, creative inspiration.
Yeah.
He's drawn to the arts, music, poetry.
Makes sense.
And his romantic pursuits seem to fuel that.
But he experiences heartbreak too, right?
He does, like with Daphne.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if he's always restless, always looking for something he can't quite reach.
Yeah, I see that. And he never marries, does he?
No, he doesn't.
Despite all those lovers?
He needs his freedom, doesn't want to be tied down.
Okay, but that kind of lines him with Artemis, right?
He does.
She values her freedom too.
Exactly.
So despite their wildly different approaches to love, there's this shared thread of autonomy.
Yeah, rejecting those traditional expectations.
Fascinating how different paths can lead to a similar outcome.
It is.
It speaks to how complex their characters are.
Yeah, and how multifaceted their mythology is.
But there's something else we need to talk about.
What's that?
Their connection to nature.
Oh, yeah.
Their domains. Artemis with the moon and wilderness, Apollo with the sun and civilization.
Yeah.
It's so intertwined with the forces of nature.
Absolutely. It's not just symbolism. It's a fundamental part of who they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about Apollo and Artemis and their connection to nature. It's more than just them being associated with certain domains, right?
It's like woven into their stories, their actions.
Yeah.
Like take Artemis, for example.
Okay.
She's often depicted with the moon, the night, the wilderness. She embodies those aspects of nature that are mysterious, untamed, even dangerous.
Right. And her fierce protection of wild animals,
her
preference for nymphs and huntresses over anyone else.
It all points to this deep reverence for nature, for a world untouched by human civilization.
Yeah, like she's a protector of the vulnerable.
Exactly.
Of those who exist outside the boundaries of human society.
Right.
Like she represents that raw, primal energy of nature.
The forces that both nurture and challenge us.
It's like she embodies that part of us that longs for freedom, for a connection to something bigger than ourselves. And then you have Apollo, often linked with the sun, the day, the rational mind.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast.
Yeah, but it's not as simple as it seems, is it?
No, not at all.
Because Apollo represents order and reason and clarity, but he's also connected to nature through his roles as a shepherd and a god of healing.
Right.
So he understands the balance of life, the cyclical nature of growth and decay.
Yeah, and how those forces influence both the natural world and human existence.
So it's almost like they represent two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
The wild and the cultivated.
Yeah.
The untamed and the ordered.
But both necessary for the world to thrive.
Right. It's not about one being superior to the other.
No.
It's about understanding that interconnectedness of all things.
Exactly. The sun needs the moon, the day needs the night. And civilization ultimately depends on the natural world.
And you see this idea of balance play out in so many of their stories.
Right.
Like their birth on a floating island, their shared skill with the bow and arrow, their contrasting approaches to love, their roles in the Trojan War.
It's all part of this intricate tapestry, opposing forces working together, creating this dynamic tension that propels the world forward.
And speaking of dynamic tension,
I
think it's time we go back to the story of Artemis and Orion.
Yeah, good idea.
It really encapsulates this interplay of forces, the clash between the wild and the civilized, between individual desire and responsibility.
Absolutely.
Okay, so remind me, how does their story go again?
Okay, so
I know there's so many variations.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep track.
Well, in most versions, Artemis and Orion meet while hunting.
Oh.
They're both drawn to the thrill of the chase. The challenge, the beauty of the natural world. Kindred spirits, connected by their shared passion for the wild.
It sounds idyllic.
Yeah, for a time.
Right, but there's a tragic twist.
Of course, it's Greek mythology.
Yeah.
So in one version, Orion boasts to Gaia that he can kill every animal on Earth.
Oh, that's not going to go well.
No, you don't challenge Gaia.
So she's got to put him in his place.
Exactly. She sends a giant scorpion after him.
Oh, wow.
Big battle. Ultimately, Orion is killed.
Oh.
Artemis is heartbroken. She places his image in the stars.
As the constellation Orion?
Yeah, to memorialize their connection.
It's beautiful.
It is.
A way to honor him and keep him close. But there's that other version, right?
Right.
Where Apollo gets involved.
Right, that's where it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Apollo is either jealous, sees Orion as a rival.
Okay.
Or he's worried Orion will tempt Artemis to break her vow.
Right. Jeopardize her status.
Exactly.
It's interesting how both of those interpretations show that Apollo sees Orion as a threat.
Yeah.
Like he can't imagine his sister being connected to anyone else.
It speaks to that possessiveness in sibling relationships.
Yeah.
And all the pressure on Artemis to maintain her image as this independent goddess.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So to get rid of Orion, Apollo challenges Artemis to a contest.
Okay.
He dares her to hit this target in the waves. But it's actually Orion's head.
That's so messed up.
It is.
To manipulate his own sister like that.
Yeah, it makes you question his motives.
Yeah. Even if he thinks he's protecting her.
Definitely.
And for Artemis, she becomes the instrument of her own beloved's death.
It's a horrible tragedy.
It is.
And it really highlights the tension between their domains.
Yes.
You have Artemis representing the wild, connected to Orion.
Who embodies that same wild spirit.
And then Apollo representing order, intervening in a way that leads to destruction.
It's like civilization encroaching on the wild.
Yeah, disrupting the natural balance.
With devastating consequences.
Absolutely.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredible.
It has.
We've explored so much. Their birth, their personalities, their domains, their roles in the Trojan War, their relationships, even their connection to nature.
It's been a journey.
It really has.
And it's clear that Apollo and Artemis are so much more than just figures in mythology.
Right.
They represent these fundamental forces that are still relevant today.
I totally agree.
You know, they embody that eternal struggle between opposing forces, the need for balance between order and chaos, reason and instinct, the wild and the civilized.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to really think about?
That's a good question.
Like, what's that lingering question they should walk away with?
Well, we talked a lot about duality.
Yeah.
About the opposing forces that they represent.
Right.
But I think the real question is, do these forces have to be in conflict?
I like that.
Or can they coexist?
Yeah.
Complement each other?
Yeah.
Maybe even create something new and beautiful through their interaction.
That's a powerful thought.
It's not about choosing sides.
Right.
It's about understanding how everything's connected, embracing that complexity and finding that balance.
That allows both the wild and the civilized to thrive.
Exactly.
That's a perfect note to end on.
I think so.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Apollo and Artemis.
It was my pleasure.
Make sure to check out the show notes for links to the source material.
So you can keep exploring.
Yeah. And until next time, happy diving.